Bonjour à tous. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Before I get started, special thoughts this weekend to an incredible mayor, Hazel McCallion. She is a force of nature, and she'll be celebrating her 100th birthday this weekend. Hazel, you have served your community for decades. It's no surprise that you'll be celebrating your 100th by supporting Trillium Health. Happy birthday, dear friend, and thank you for everything you've done and everything you continue to do.
I know that for many people, it won't be possible to spend time with their families on the weekend for St. Valentine's Day. That's not easy. The situation we're in is not easy, but it won't last forever. We've made a lot of progress, and we must continue to do so to get through this pandemic a bit longer. There is hope on the horizon, and we can't give up. Furthermore, today, I would like to start by giving an update about vaccines.
A few weeks ago, I talked with the global CEO of Pfizer, Dr. Albert Bourla. Between that conversation and the excellent work done by Minister Anand, we have some updates to share today. We've received an updated delivery schedule from Pfizer that brings us to the end of March, and we can confirm we will be receiving the 4 million doses we've been committed to since last November from Pfizer by the end of that month. We will share this schedule with provinces and territories so they can prepare to get all those doses into people's arms. For the months following from Pfizer, we'll be getting the next doses sooner. We've brought forward millions of doses into Q2, so that we will receive 10.8 million doses of Pfizer between April and June, and all of our remaining doses of Pfizer in Q3 before the end of September. That is, we will have received 40 million doses from Pfizer by the end of September. That's part of the reason why we can say with such confidence that everyone who wants a vaccine in Canada will get one by the end of September. We've been continuing to work every single day on getting as many doses as possible, as quickly as possible, into Canadians' arms. On top of this news on Pfizer, I can also share today that we've purchased 4 million additional doses of the Moderna vaccine, which will be arriving over the summer. We had
an update concerning the Pfizer delivery. It is confirmed that we will receive the 4 million doses by the end of March. We will share the schedule with the provinces and territories so that they can make plans. For the spring, Canada will receive Pfizer doses earlier than planned, 10.8 million doses between April and June, and the remaining doses will arrive during the third quarter. And just from Pfizer, we will receive 40 million doses in total by the end of September. Every vaccine dose will help protect Canadians and help us get through this crisis. I know that you're wondering when your doses are coming, but things are moving forward and your vaccines are coming. Today, I can also announce that we have purchased 4 million additional doses of the Moderna vaccine. These doses, which will arrive throughout the summer, will be added to the 40 million doses that we will be reserving from Moderna this year. In total, Canada will have 84 million doses of both vaccines currently approved by the end of September. So any doses from AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson or others that may be approved in the coming months will be in addition to all of this. But these 84 million doses that are confirmed by the 2 approved vaccines by the end of September is why we can say with such confidence that anyone who wishes to be vaccinated here in Canada will be vaccinated by the end of September.
Just like vaccines, I know that border measures are also on a lot of people's minds. Recently, I had a great chat with Annette from Ottawa. She had written to me about people vacationing abroad and, as she put it, ignoring rules that had been in place for quite some time. Annette, today I want to tell you what else we're going to be doing about this.
We've already worked with the main air carriers across the country to suspend their service to sun destinations. I would like to once again thank them for their leadership on this file. As I already said, we will be there for them and their workers so that international trips can be reestablished safely as soon as possible.
Suspending flights to sun destinations, international flights are now arriving at only 4 major Canadian airports. And no matter the flight, everyone must have proof of a negative PCR test taken within 72 hours of boarding. Starting today, people returning by land borders will also need to show proof of a negative PCR test taken within 72 hours before arrival. And all returning travelers must quarantine for 14 days after coming home or risk heavy fines and possible jail time. These are some of the strongest measures in the world. But with new variants emerging, we're stepping them up even further. Later today, Ministers Haydú, Blair, and LeBlanc will announce the details of new testing, quarantine, and enforcement for everyone flying or driving back to Canada. These measures will take effect starting February 22nd. Putting these additional measures in place is a true team effort. To Canadian Airlines and border agents, thank you. To public health employees, to hotel workers and owners, thank you for all the work you're doing and for doing your part.
We have already established some of the strictest border measures in the world, and with the presence of new variants, stricter measures are needed. Later today, Ministers Haydú, Blair, and LeBlanc will provide more information about new testing and quarantine measures targeting people who are returning to Canada by air or car. These measures will come into effect February 22nd. Their objective is to ensure the safety of Canadians. Obviously, there will be exceptions for essential travel, particularly for truckers and health workers. For everyone else, people should simply not travel. We won't allow irresponsible decisions of a few to imperil everyone. We will do everything that we can to protect people and to master this virus.
These measures will help stop the spread of COVID-19 and new variants. And that's not all we're doing on that front. We're also investing $53 million for an integrated variants of concern strategy to help monitor variants like the ones first detected in the UK and South Africa. You might be worried about these new strains. Well, we're putting our best experts on it. Researchers, epidemiologists, modelers. With investments like this, Canada is ready to detect, track, and treat new cases. I know you're probably watching the news these days attentively, as everyone is, and watching the positive sign of the cases going down across the country. That is a good step in the right direction, but we also know at the same time the new variants that are more communicable, more easily transmitted, are increasingly out there. So we need to stay careful. You are doing a great job, making the sacrifices necessary that have shown us on the right track, but we're going to need to stay vigilant. We're going to need to be careful if we're going to make it through this spring in the best possible way to be able to enjoy a better future for all. Because nobody wants a third wave to start, particularly not one comprised of new, more communicable variants that can cause real challenges. Today, I also want to talk about what we're doing to support everyone, no matter who you are, during this global crisis. In the last year, we've seen once again how tough times fall first and hardest on the most vulnerable. The legacy of this pandemic must not be some people getting ahead while others fall behind. Instead, it must be a stronger, fairer Canada for everyone, and that includes for women and girls. Already, we've invested in everything from safe places for women and girls to stay to moving forward on an action plan for women in the economy. And we're not stopping there. As Minister Monsef announced yesterday, we're launching Feminist Response and Recovery Funding. This will support organizations that work to end violence against women and girls, that invest in their economic security and that empower women leaders.
No one should have to confront this crisis alone. We have already invested in support measures for people who work in some of the most strongly affected industries like theater arts and airlines. We have announced measures to support these people. Since the implementation, thousands of jobs have been saved in the film and small screen industry. And this week, Minister Guilbeault announced that the fund will be extended to next year, namely March 31st, 2022. Regardless of who you are, we will give you the support you need. That is why we launched CERB last March. It's why we created the Canadian Recovery Benefit to extend the wage subsidy. We are ready to give out the assistance needed as long as needed.
Better days are ahead of us. On that note, I want to end this morning by wishing everyone a happy Lunar New Year, particularly to those from East Asian communities. The Year of the Ox is particularly apropos for this particular time we're in, as it's about hard work, perseverance, and trustworthiness. I think that's exactly what's going to get us through the coming months. Instead of lion dances and fireworks this year, you might be celebrating by delivering PPE to frontline workers or dropping off groceries to elderly neighbors. Every day, you remind us that diversity is our strength, and it's something that we will always defend. There's no place in this country for hate or racism. We will always stand against anti-Asian racism and against all forms of racism and discrimination. We are stronger together today and always. Bon nouvel an lunaire, tout le monde.
Happy Lunar New Year, everyone.
Sheshe. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to media for the questions. One question, one follow-up on the phone. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Alex Ballangal, Toronto Star. Line open.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for taking my question. Just you mentioned you got the delivery schedule and the confirmation for Pfizer up to the end of March that we get the 4 million. I know obviously Moderna's been delayed too. Do you have any update about will we get the 2 million Modernas by that point, by the end of March, or what's the deal with Moderna?
We continue to get assurances from Moderna that they will be able to deliver those 2 million doses they had committed for the end of March. But we will, of course, continue to follow up directly with the company to make sure that we can get those doses as soon as possible and indeed secure more and sooner doses for all Canadians.
I can confirm that Moderna is continuing to tell us that they will be able to deliver the 2 million doses by the end of March as anticipated, but we will continue to work closely with them to ensure that we receive these doses and perhaps even additional ones in the coming months.
Follow-up, Alex?
Yeah, this week you had a conversation with the Indian Prime Minister Modi. In the Indian government's readout, they said that you called him and told him Canada needs access to India's vaccine. Does Canada need to source its 20 million AstraZeneca vaccines from India? And just can you tell us what exactly you said to the Indian Prime Minister?
We have a deal, as you pointed out, for 20 million AstraZeneca vaccines. Those are not from the Indian production facility. I believe they're from the AstraZeneca facility in South Korea, but others can confirm that. We are looking at possible extra vaccines coming from India, from the Serum Institute. Work is being done closely on that. It was good to talk to Prime Minister Modi on a range of subjects, including the role that India is playing in producing vaccines for the developing world and other issues that are important to us. We will continue to work with people around the world to ensure that we're solving this pandemic for Canadians and indeed for everyone around the world. Okay.
I can confirm that the 20 million doses from AstraZeneca that we will be receiving in the coming months do not come from India, but we are still interested in sourcing or finding others. That is why it's a good thing to speak with the Indian government and to pursue opportunities with the Serum Institute in India. We will continue to have conversations with all of our allies around the world to ensure that we have the means to get through this pandemic as quickly as possible. For Canadians and everyone around the world must work together, and that is what we are doing. Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Mélanie Marquis, La Presse.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. According to an Angus Reid poll, less than 30% of people believe that they will be vaccinated by the end of September. And yet it's one of your most significant promises. I know that you're in a minority government, but are you committing to not dissolve Parliament so that Canadians can judge you on this matter specifically? Answer: our priority is to vaccinate as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. That is what we are working on. I understand that there are anxieties that people are feeling and that there have been temporary interruptions over the past few weeks, and they're worried about the coming months. But I can tell you that in the coming weeks, we will start seeing an increase, an enormous increase in the number of doses arriving in Canada until spring and until September, where we are absolutely on track to receive enough vaccines and even more than enough vaccines to vaccinate all Canadians who wish to receive a vaccination. Our priority is that, and that is what we will continue to work on daily. A follow-up question. I understand, but that doesn't answer the question. Are you committing to not dissolve Parliament by September so that Canadians can hold a referendum on this issue? Answer: our motivation is not whether we get the approval of Canadians. Our goal is to vaccinate Canadians as quickly as possible. I understand that maybe you have a particular interest in politics here, but as politicians, as government, our interest is to vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible. So I don't want to get into hypotheticals. Our focus, our priority, and what we are continuing to do is deliver millions of vaccines to Canadians in the coming months and to ensure that we're very clear that everyone who wishes to be vaccinated will be vaccinated by the end of September.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Brett Forster, APTN News. Line open.
Hi, Prime Minister. APTN News has obtained hundreds of DFO documents from the September launch of the Mi'kmaq moderate livelihood fishery that reveal law enforcement was unprepared and unresourced to respond to the vigilante protests that they knew were coming. The RCMP had one boat. The protesters had 150 at one point. The Coast Guard was still in transit. And DFO officers have been instructed to observe, record, and report. Are you going to hold anyone accountable for that?
I think all Canadians expect our police forces to be able to respond to difficult situations rapidly and in a way that demonstrates their ability to keep Canadians safe. There are a number of questions being asked about what exactly happened and about the RCMP response around the Mi'kmaq protests and the protests of Mi'kmaq, and we will make sure that we get those answers, not just for the government, but for Canadians.
Follow-up, Brett?
Yeah, can you just explain a little bit what that means? I mean, are you going to personally seek accountability from the federal agencies that allowed this to happen? And if not, what does that say to Indigenous communities who saw the RCMP and the DFO stand by as this violence unfolded?
I think there are questions for all different jurisdictions and the police of jurisdictions involved in this. We've certainly worked very closely with the Mi'kmaq over the past many months to resolve this issue and bring non-Indigenous fishers along. It is unacceptable to have seen any form of violence and intimidation of Indigenous fishers in this situation, and people have questions that they are expecting answers to, and I am one of those people.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Question. Have you made a decision about possible exemptions to these travel restrictions? We know that a solution that was found for Olympic and Paralympic athletes, there are some people who are very concerned about going overseas for medical treatment, for example, or people who must travel for humanitarian reasons, for funerals, for example, and people who are worried. What would you tell them today? Answer. We already know that essential workers are protected and don't have to go through the same restrictions. We need to count on our truckers, on frontline workers in our health system who sometimes must cross borders. We are trying to keep Canadians safe, but we will also look at making necessary exceptions on a case-by-case basis for people in specific conditions. Our goal is not to punish people. Our goal is to protect and to discourage any non-essential travel. That is the work that we will do. If there are exceptional situations, then our priority is to do everything to protect the safety of all Canadians.
Obviously, we've taken significant measures to keep Canadians safe, particularly given the threat of these new variants that are being developed or that are emerging elsewhere around the world. We know that our border measures are in place. There are already a number of exceptions for essential travelers, and we're continuing to look at ways to make sure that we're keeping them safe and Canadians safe, even as essential trade and medical services crisscross the border. At the same time, we're aware that we need to be thoughtful and compassionate about people who are in extremely difficult situations and absolutely need to travel. We're not trying to punish people. We're trying to keep people safe. And keeping Canadians safe from the viruses and discouraging all non-essential travel and ensuring that if people do have to travel, they're doing the things that we can be certain are going to prevent the virus from spreading further in Canada, particularly given new variants. We will continue to work with people and the ministers involved. We'll continue to watch closely for additions or adjustments that need to be made to these measures. But every step of the way, what we're doing is to keep all Canadians safe.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association says if you're going to make people stay in these hotels at their own expense, possibly make them quarantine in a government facility, you need to do this based on evidence. What evidence do you have that Canadians are ignoring existing quarantine rules and that these new rules are necessary?
The initial quarantine, the initial testing on arrival needs to be a PCR test. Everyone who arrives everyone who arrives in Canada has a PCR test over the past 72 hours. So we know that even if they start to develop the virus inside of them, it'll still be at reasonably low numbers, which is why a rapid test on arrival is not as good as a PCR test. That PCR test, particularly if there are significant numbers of travelers, could take 2 or 3 days to get a result. As soon as they get the result of that PCR test, they will be free to go home and quarantine themselves. It's not a punitive measure to keep people in quarantine for 3 days while they get the result. It's just so that we can get a negative result off of that test. Now, anyone who shows up at a border crossing without an adequate quarantine plan already is directed to quarantine facilities approved by PHAC so that they can do it safely. Many people will choose to do it because particularly in cases of new variants that are much more transmissible, it becomes extremely difficult to quarantine in a home and not pass this new variant to anyone else in the home because it is much more transmissible. So every decision we're taking is based on the best possible evidence and will continue to be as we do everything we can to protect Canadians from the threats of these new variants. The decision
that we made to ask people to remain 3 days in hotel is not a punishment. It is to allow for the results of the test to be analyzed. The PCR test that is conducted upon arrival will take about 2 or 3 days to obtain results. As soon as they receive a negative result, even if it's just after 1 day, they can return home to finish the remainder of their quarantine if they have a sufficient quarantine plan. We know that even now, when people arrive at the border and they show their quarantine plan, if they don't have a sufficient plan, they are directed currently to quarantine centers run by the government to ensure that they can protect themselves and protect all Canadians.
Vaccines, you've got some good news from Pfizer today, but Manitoba said yesterday it's going to strike out and buy vaccines on its own. So I'm wondering, do you think that's political, or do you think that there are people out there, premiers even, who don't buy your assurances that you're going to get all these vaccines you're promising?
I think all Canadians want to see us all doing everything we can to get everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible. I can tell you that the federal government has secured and paid for enough vaccines to get all Canadians who want it vaccinated by this September, including the entire population of Manitoba.
French, no? Hello, Prime Minister. It's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. The number of cases of the variants are growing, and medical officials are warning people that we could be facing a third wave in the next coming weeks if we don't get this spread under control. But still, Alberta and Ontario are reopening. You just said that nobody wants to see a third wave. So do you think it's responsible for the provinces to be reopening right now, despite these dire warnings? And what would it take for you to invoke the Emergencies Act to try and slow down this spread?
I think all Canadians are worried about these variants, and we need to be. We have gotten used to, over the past many weeks, making a number of sacrifices that have successfully brought the numbers down in terms of caseloads. We're going in the right direction, and that's a reason for cautious optimism. But at the same time as these new variants are starting to spread through the communities, we're going to need to be extra vigilant and extra careful. And obviously, citizens should continue to keep their contact numbers down. We should continue to be doing the things we know we need to do, like wearing masks and downloading the app. I mean, as certain restrictions are perhaps released by certain provinces, and people get to go out a little bit more, all the more reason to download the COVID Alert app, which will help you as you get out there in case you come into contact without knowing with someone who later tests positive. These are the kinds of things that we can do. We need to continue to be vigilant. As a federal government, we've given tremendous supports to businesses, to families, and to the provinces to allow them to make those decisions to keep everyone hunkered down a little longer. We will work with the provinces on the decisions they take, but at the same time, I think everyone understands that we need to be extra vigilant as we enter this phase of potential spread of these new variants. That's why things like contact tracing, rapid testing, the app, and continued careful choices by all Canadians not to gather and to keep distances are our best chance of getting through, in the best way possible, to the mass vaccinations that are coming in the coming months.
But why reopen if we could be in a third wave within weeks?
We make our decisions based on the best recommendations of our health officials, and as a federal government, we will be there to support and encourage the right decisions by the provinces.
Hello, Prime Minister. I'm Mike Blanchfield, Canadian Press. You just mentioned rapid testing just a moment ago. How is the federal government using rapid tests in its areas of jurisdiction? If we have a lot to spare, Would they be useful at borders, notwithstanding what you said earlier, to speed things up in remote Indigenous communities, prisons? Let's hear more about what you think the federal role in rapid tests should be.
I had extensive conversations earlier this week with a number of ministers. We're looking at using increased rapid tests in federal institutions like prisons, looking at using them in various ways. We know that they are an important part of the process, particularly as we come towards the spring, and we'll have more to say very soon about all the different ways we're going to be using the millions of rapid tests that keep coming into Canada.
We recognize that rapid tests are very important as an additional measure to protect Canadians. The federal government is looking at how we can send more of them to various companies, use them in federal institutions like penitentiaries. We will use these rapid tests as a measure to continue to keep Canadians safe.
David Aiken, Global News. Good morning, Prime Minister. Good morning, David. I'd like to come back to some issues around General Vance. We've been reporting that he was investigated by military police in 2015 about his conduct while he was serving as the deputy commander of a NATO headquarters in Naples, Italy. So first, were you aware of that 2015 investigation? And more broadly, and we've asked before, but we have not heard you answer this, were you aware of any concerns about General Vance's behavior towards subordinate women?
First of all, I wasn't yet Prime Minister when General Vance was selected in 2015, so there are processes that happened before we came into office that I can't speak to. At the same time, I want to reassure everyone that we always take these allegations extremely seriously. As a government, we have strengthened our measures in place. We have empowered the processes that oversee and investigate and review these issues, and we will continue to make sure that all the right steps are followed, that we continue to ensure that everyone has the right to a safe workplace, whether they work for the Canadian government, the Canadian military, or quite frankly, any workplace in this country. It's a commitment that we take very, very seriously, and we will continue to do everything we need to keep everyone safe. I
can reassure everyone that our government takes the responsibility of ensuring a safe workplace very seriously. We will always follow the rules, and we will always seek to strengthen the processes and tools to ensure the safety of everyone and follow up on any allegation. Thank you. Good day, everyone.